morning and welcome to Coffee Time with Kauffman, the comfortable place to talk about women's leadership. Today we have Ivna Curi with us. Hey, Ivna.
Hello there. How are you? I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I can't wait to chat with you guys.
We're going to have some fun. Ivna helps people get taken seriously with speak up politely skills and assertive communication. She is a Forbes contributor and she is the founder and CEO of AssertiveWay.com. But before I get into that, my name is Maria Kauffman and I'm Ability Partners and friends. And I am just hooked on what you do with assertiveness. So tell me a little bit about your story and how you came to be where you are today.
So I also know that your audience, and first of all, guys, it's so lovely to spend time. I get to chat with Maria every week, and it's so great that you guys are having an opportunity here. She created this time with you guys to share so much of her thoughts and her ideas and her contribution and her thought leadership with you guys to help you as women embrace your leadership. And yeah, so my story, as I know a lot of you are in STEM as well, and that's where I started my career in like I studied engineering, like electrical engineering, electrical electronic. My whole family is all of engineers, including my mom. And I always loved those things, science, maths, and ended up after that getting more into supply chain management, but very much from an analytical point of view. And then I went on to do my MBA and then still work in analytics, in planning, a lot of spreadsheets still. And my team was also doing that kind of work. So that was really fun. But in the process, you know, like many of you, I had no trouble with the numbers. That was all really easy and fun. But I did find the human part quite challenging. And not that it was for shyness per se or being introverted. It was beyond that, right? and that's where the whole assertiveness thing came about.
What do you mean beyond that?
Yeah, so beyond that, so you would think a lot of people get this wrong, right? Like they confuse shyness and being a people pleaser and being introverted and having social anxiety. They're totally different things. They're not the same thing at all. And the reality is I had all of those.
Just all of them.
Everything.
And that's why quiet, introverted, the whole thing.
Social anxiety, the whole thing. The whole deal. And that's how I realized, like, okay, one by one, I had to defeat my social anxiety. Okay, that's check. But I'm still having issues. What's going on? Okay, well, it's shyness. Okay, check. Worked on that. Great. Okay, I'm still having issues. What's going on? Well, I actually figured out how to actually enjoy social interactions and networking to a point where I'm like almost ambivert. And so I'm like, check. Great. I needed that for my profession. Great. I'm still having problems.
Oh.
And that's
so it was like you didn't even know what the list was, but it was just like, okay, well, when I see this thing, let's just check it off. But then like it was like almost like a ticker tape. So like another thing kept coming in.
Yeah. What's that? What's that name? The game called? It's like guacamole or something.
Whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole. It's kind of like whack-a-mole.
Yeah, always coming up. Well, let's take a big step back. What were you like as a little kid?
Well, exactly that. Shy.
This was before you were checking things off, or were you young enough to remember that social situations were that challenging? Oh, really?
Oh,
even from a young
hard.
age?
Incredibly hard. Incredibly. The hardest part for me was that. Like,
okay. So you had a mom and a dad that were engineers, and then you got into engineering. Was there a comfortable place where you could exist like with math and numbers at a young age?
Oh, I love that stuff. Totally comfortable with that stuff. Loved it. I was there with my numbers, my equations, my deductions, everything was fantastic.
Inductions. I love
Happy
it.
place.
Right. It's the happy place, right? I love to be with women. And it seems like now more than ever, now that I'm in a whole different role and meeting new people in different ways, and maybe it's a little bit of the sign of the time, but to talk technical and to bring out the numbers and be like, oh, I love to do that. That was not always the way for me. Not everybody could relate to that mental aspect, I guess. So it's always been fun with you as we analyze our numbers.
Yeah, it's so fun.
So, okay, so you're moving up. So even from a young age, you're kind of trying to get these social interactions, I want to say adjusted, but or checked off the list. What are the significant moments, I'll say, before you got into college, that helped you line yourself up to get into engineering?
Ah, interesting. So before college, well, I just started doing a bunch of these like physics and math Olympics.
Oh, did
So
you?
city level, school level, then city level, then state level, then national level. And I got hooked, And then in that process, when I got to national level, I got invited to the top university of my country, Brazil, which is a military school and like an aeronautics school. And they invited me there to do like a 1 month, 2 month boot camp on physics. And from that group of 40 people, they're going to select the top to go to the regional and international physics competition. Failed miserably, but I loved the campus and meeting smart people. And I'm like, this is my place. I'm so nerdy. I love these people. Like, this is where I need to come. And so that's where I applied. I got in and studied there for 5 years, my electrical engineering, and loved the people. It's just I had as I had had that experience in high school.
Yeah, well, that's pretty awesome. And I love then too a story that embraces both a success and a failure.
Oh yeah.
At the same time, it's like, it's almost like you didn't even see the failure as a failure. It was like, this is the thing that opened me up to the direction that your life took.
Okay, let me explain something. 10 years later, that's how I see it.
Fair enough. That is fair enough. At the time, it was a heartbreak.
It was a heartbreak. I felt like I was the dumbest kid around. But it's like you're failing out of the very top. And it's like it's very easy for you to keep punishing yourself and saying, you're not good enough. And what I learned was that as we move up and we surround ourselves with people that are even better than us, that's a great sign. When we start failing, that means we're stretching ourselves. That means we're getting out of our comfort zone. That is where we want to be. We don't want to be the best out of the worst, the best house in the worst neighborhood. That doesn't serve us. There's no potential for increase.
I love that. I love that word. I love that perspective, that insight. Awesome. So cool. So you go to college, you get an engineering degree, So then what happens?
Well, I get excited. I'm already at the end. I'm already interested in the learning more about the business side of things, which is very common. Like you do engineering. Some people go to engineering. Some people go to academics. Some people go into business and finance. So I was really curious about the business side. I was already thinking about, okay, I want an international MBA. I just want to get out there and explore the world. What's my path? And then I started pursuing that path. And that's when I got my first job was a supply chain management job. Not that I love supply chain management. I had no idea what supply chain management was. And I think a lot of people, the first job is like, they have got no idea what you're doing. But it sounded interesting. It was a good company. It was an opportunity to work at the headquarters of Johnson & Johnson in the US. Nice. And with, really senior people. And I'm like, I'm taking it. And that's when I started to have to deal with humans.
I love it.
That's when I started to fall.
You couldn't hide behind the numbers, no more no's in the book. No, analytics had to slightly fall to the wayside. What was that like?
My gosh, like when you're relying on your computer and your numbers, everything's beautiful. And then starting the real world is like, what?
Go to lunch with people?
Go to lunch with people, talk, and not only talk, that's the worst part. It's like negotiate.
Interview?
Interview.
People?
How to convince your boss that you actually don't want to show up to work and want to go to a conference. That was hard.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. How do you, and these are like male bosses, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I love it. Yes.
My bosses want me to chase his team and keep them accountable. Me call people up at an age 22 and say, you owe a report, call seniors of mine that are like 50, 60-year-old and say, way more senior, and say, hey, you got to send me the report right now, keeping them accountable. That's so hard. That was so hard. And then when they put a lady in between me and my boss and I felt demoted.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, all of that in that first job, that first year.
In the first year at 22.
At 22. You like a lot of human things coming up for the first time.
Okay, so on your list, you don't even know it's a list, but you're checking off things. Where are you with coming out of your shyness? Or was it really, this is where the list really came into play, or some kind of awareness? Help us understand what happened.
I love that question because I actually never thought of it that way. But yeah, so I was able to defeat the majority of shyness, like social anxiety of like not being able to look at a human being in the eyes and have a conversation in college. So I was able to overcome that in college. But I was starting to explore networking, going to conferences, talking to people, talking about my work, talking
to humans,
like actually having a dialogue.
Okay.
And exchanging ideas and being curious about them and sharing about what we call self-disclosure. It's like an actual assertiveness technique, self-disclosure. And so I started training these things and I got really into it. I loved meeting strangers in like conference events in the streets and just starting up random conversations. That's when I started learning that.
So, okay, so you go to a conference. Was this the conference that you had to ask your boss to go to?
Oh, in that 1 year, I probably went to 10 conferences.
Oh, really?
I just, every conference I could find, every business school conference, every industry conference, every international conference, I just wanted to be there.
So you're actively seeking conferences. Is this like a company, like you have an expense account where, they're paying you to go to these conferences?
No. And there's no day off for that either.
Oh, right. So I'll have to squeeze in my story as well.
Oh, okay. Tell me.
Because, and this was over 30 years ago, I finally get, I'm out of college, and actually my first job out of college was not an engineering job. It wasn't a great time to graduate. So it took me maybe a year, and I finally got the engineering job. And almost as soon as I get that first engineering job, it was consulting, doing consulting engineering. So it was kind of like, I landed a really good job. That was the downside for me was it's a lot of office work. So you're, doing specs and drawings and, the design work. I was more of a field person. I wanted more of the hands-on. I wanted to get into where the rubber hits the road, if you will. So anyways, as soon as I get into this office environment, and it's all professional dress, this is way before even the idea of doing a casual Friday came about. It was like Monday through Friday, you were professional dressed.
Wow.
Okay. And my mother loved it. I did like, the professional aspect of that. But being in that environment, I just knew something was missing. So eventually, and this is back in the day of no email, right? Because we didn't even have personal computers at that time. So there was paper mail and something must have come across. I imagine at work. I doubt that it came to my home address. I saw a workshop, and I had to take a day off of my own time and spend my own money to go to an assertive communication workshop.
That is the best workshop ever that you could have chosen for a young professional woman.
Yes, because for me, I think in the menu of all these courses, maybe it was partly the only one I could afford, but it definitely spoke to me. And there was a disconnect between what I was witnessing in others who look successful and confident in the workplace and me. So I see this assertive communication and I'm like, I have to have it. And it was a bit of a hard pill to swallow because I had to take my own time and spend my own money and take a day off of pay. Like that, I will never forget it. But at the same time, oh my goodness.
Eye-opening, right?
Did
you know what you were getting? Like, did you know what assertiveness was? Because nowadays, people, I don't even know in the past if this was the case. Assertiveness is very much associated with a negative thing. It's got a negative stigma to it. I don't know if that ever came to you in that way, or you never even thought of it. Did you know exactly what it was when you signed up?
I knew it was something that I had to have.
How did you know that?
And there was probably maybe one paragraph that kind of described what it was.
Got it.
And I felt like it just resonated. It was like, this feels like the thing that's missing to me, because I'm sure communication was a challenge. I was probably struggling with communicating. I'll say like as if I had ideas back at the time. I'll say that I was struggling with all of my ideas, but I'm not even sure I had any at the time. I was so young. I was more learning at the time. So yeah, I went. I had no idea what assertive meant. But the woman who taught the class, really, I can almost remember what she looked like to this day. I don't remember her name, but her confidence and the fact that there was someone out there that does this for a living also really captivated me. And yeah, it was a magical day. Probably the best money I ever spent. Walking away from the class, I knew I did the right thing, and it was very, very powerful. Absolutely.
What was your, I don't know, it was a long time ago, but what was that you remember, something that you took away and that you were able to like apply soon after the class? Is there anything you can remember vividly, or at least a perspective shift that you had in that class?
I guarantee you, even to this day, I can probably tell you that there was a formula that I walked away with.
Okay.
And then there was also the understanding. She helped me understand passive, aggressive, and assertive.
Yes.
So she talked about those three. I think you have a fourth style in there that I think I actually am. And the formula went something like this. It was something like, first of all, you know, when you run into a situation, right, and you take a pause, and instead of acting or being passive or aggressive, I'm sure at the time I was probably concerned more about my aggressiveness.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I probably had a tendency to stay quiet for too long, and I think I'm a passive aggressive.
But why were you worried about being aggressive?
Because when I finally come to say something,
yeah, that's very common.
It is so sharp.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely aggressive. It's almost, and I just didn't know any other way. I grew up with two older brothers, very, very confrontational. And that was basically the environment that I was taught, was that you're always just making fun of somebody, right? Putting somebody down. I mean, that was my world. So she gave us this formula. It went something like, when you have this situation and you're feeling like you want to, or you should be assertive, you kind of call it out and say, hey, I used it on my sister.
Okay.
My first time out of the workshop, I used it on my sister and I said, hey, I notice. So it's kind of like you have to notice something and just bring the facts around.
Which we're great at, right? Us STEM people, women.
Yeah.
Facts. We know it very good how to distinguish facts from non-facts.
Yes. So that was right. And that was a good place for me to start because I can always notice at least one fact. So I'd say, I notice you borrowed clothes from my
I love it.
my wardrobe. Right?
I love it. Okay.
And then you have to say how you feel.
Yes. Now that's the part that we're uncomfortable. That's very hard for us engineers.
Oh my God.
Feelings, icky, like touchy-feely feelings.
It was
Yeah. Okay. So what did you say?
But I start with the fact.
The
so
facts,
even
great.
In my mind, it's like, okay, I can follow up with the feeling because I started with the fact.
Okay. At least you start with the fact. Now it's transitioned smoothly into the feeling and it works. Okay.
So then I can say, it makes me feel angry.
Okay, nice.
But I don't have to say it in an angry way, too.
Yes.
Like, it was a magical formula.
So
to be able to say that I feel angry and not like be angry when I say it was like cow to the moon. And then it would follow up with something like, maybe the next time you might want to ask me first before you borrow my clothes.
That's the request part. That's the ask.
Yes. And so I say the formula to my sister, and we're literally, I can remember where I said it because I was like on the stairs even, almost like I was just so like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this formula for the first time, right?
Isn't that fun when you like get to use it for the first time and see? It's like a social experiment.
It's like a social experiment. And here I am with my sister in our living room, but she's like at the other side of the room so there was enough space that I was like, even if I fail at this attempt, it'll all be fine. I can run away. I can just run up the stairs, right?
I love it.
So she says, she's looking at me the whole time and she says, wow. And I don't remember the real details, but she didn't address what I was talking about, the stealing of my clothes. And she just said, wow, that was a great delivery or something to that effect.
Oh, she loves your communication. She praised your communication.
She praised the communication.
Wow. You got a good sister there.
I know. So she noticed, and I was just like, oh. So that's where it was like, the money and the time that I spent was absolutely worth it.
And you could just repeat that over and over again.
Yeah, so I could. But I'm sure between now and then, I have not always used my assertive communication skills. Help us understand then, like you've turned this into something. You started a career. You had this magical year where you're going to all those conferences. What did that do for you?
Okay. So before I answer that question, let me very quickly, just add one more thing. I don't want to leave your audience hanging here.
Okay.
On your beautiful example of assertiveness script.
Okay.
Yeah. So the most basic form of the script is exactly what you said with a few adjustments. Okay. Which is exactly, you describe the situation in a factual way. Here's what I noticed, the closet, and you were how did you say it? So
I noticed that you're taking my clothes without asking me.
Okay, taking my clothes. Okay, the stealing is a judgmental word. You might not want to say that, even though you felt that.
Right.
You would avoid that. But exactly what you said is perfect, very clear, very factual, very non-judgmental. Then I feel angry, or I felt angry. Every time this happens, I get angry. Love it. Then you had your request. The request, you could rephrase it just a little bit because it was more the way you did it was more of a do this, was more of a demand rather than giving them the choice to accept that request or not.
Oh.
So
you put more space in there.
Yes, you give them the ability to decide to be helpful to you.
Okay, how would I have done that?
So instead of saying, in that case, this is very different if you're saying no, and if you're setting boundaries, it's a bit different. But in that case, you want to be a bit more collaborative in your first attempt. And so as an equal, right? It's different if it's like an employee or something, but you would say, hey, instead of saying, next time you try to, take my clothes, please come talk to me before that. You just switch that to, hey, I would really appreciate it if next time that you take my clothes, you come talk to me before that. Okay. Could you do that? And then that immediately that shifts. You see what I'm saying?
So I get her engagement by asking, can you do this?
Could you help that? And then and then you say, if you could do this, I think we could, and you give the positive consequence of if she chooses to help you and support you in your request. You say, hey, if you do this, I think that our relationship as sisters would really be much stronger, and I'd feel a lot more connected with you.
Oh, Ivna, where were you 30 years ago? That's much more powerful.
And you can still even add more stuff to it if you'd like, but like that is the essence.
So you kind of paint this picture, like, obviously, because that's the situation, right? It was always like, she's always stealing my clothes. And then I'm always like, so we got into this back and forth for years and years and years. But if I paint the picture of a different alternative, a different reality, then it plants a seed.
It does, because it helps her have empathy for you. Because it helps her understand your perspective, because now you're sharing your perspective without putting her down, without blaming her. You're just saying, hey, this is my perspective, and this could really be helpful to us if you could do this. This is my request. I'm being very specific here. And this would really improve our relationship.
That's magical.
Yeah.
That's really magical. Wow.
And also, there could be a point where she still argues that, hey, I don't steal your clothes, or I don't take your clothes without asking. And so if there's a risk of that happening, you could even be even more specific in the fact part, with outlining maybe 3 instances, very recent, that she can't deny.
Ooh.
With, hey, this blouse, these pants, and this skirt were in my closet this weekend, and I noticed that you took them out so you could use them at the party with your friend.
Yes.
And I know, you could even add some empathy there for them, like acknowledgement. Hey, I understand that you really like my clothes. I mean, it's great clothes, right? But
right. That specifically was in my mind along those times, that there was a part where I was like, well, obviously, there's something here, even though we're fighting on the outside, there's somewhat thing that's consistent where she keeps coming back for my clothes. So she must like my clothes or whatever, right?
Yeah. And in your ask, you could even say, hey, I really don't mind that you use my clothes. I actually find it flattering. But I also want to make sure that I know when it's happening, and that I would really appreciate if you could ask me ahead. So you kind of really, it's this really empathy side, acknowledging the other person, acknowledging them as a human, showing a little bit of your perspective without putting blame on anyone. And that'll just facilitate the communication just so much.
The empathy thing, we didn't have that 30 years ago.
No.
Well, I mean, almost honestly, back 30 years ago, we didn't have personal computers, and the self-help industry was just kind of getting started. And we weren't using that word. I didn't hear that word till, I don't know, maybe 10 or 20 years ago. Not that it wasn't around, but and because technology over the past 30 years also has changed so much, things spread quicker because of technology. So but back in the day,
not there. It's so interesting. Yeah, and that's why I've really developed part of assertiveness, a new tradition within assertiveness, which I call empathetic assertiveness.
Ooh.
Which is not taking like that hardcore dry wine assertiveness.
I love dry wine. Tell me more. Dry wine assertiveness?
Dry wine.
You had me at dry wine, but
dry wine, right? You just stop right there. And then you add a little bit of softness to it.
Oh, kind of like a bite of cheese.
Yeah, add some cheese, add some honey, add some
Fruit.
berries.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How
just
about
round
that?
it up.
That is so awesome. So cool. Take us back to Ivna's world.
Okay.
So you were going to conferences too. You're going on your own dime. So obviously there was something inside of you that was kind of driving you into this space.
Yes. So it wasn't, these were like generic conferences about business
Okay.
and business people. It wasn't about psychology or assertiveness or anything like that. I had no idea what that was yet.
Yeah.
But I was just driven by curiosity. Like, you're 20 years old, you're just curious, you just want to get out there and see the world and meet people. And that wasn't me in my teens, or my early 20s, but it did come out that way.
Awesome.
I was just curious. But then I had to start dealing with limited problems, right? With the boss and with people that I had to deal with at work, and not getting. I'll give you a very quick example. I really wanted to go in Canada. I was in the U.S., right? At Johnson & Johnson, New Jersey. I really wanted to go to Canada for to sleep on one of those ice hotels. Have you ever heard of these?
Yes.
So I booked it with my friend. We were gonna go. Everything was ready, and I told my boss that we're going. And then just a few days before, my boss says, "You're not going. You're gonna stay here and you're gonna work." And it was nothing important. So my friend went, had the best time of his life. I've never been to a nice hotel, and I
didn't go?
Didn't go because my boss made me stay.
No.
So the next time, I wanted to go to a conference really bad, and I was actually scared of negotiating and asking, so I lied. I gave a different reason. We do that sometimes. So sometimes you just don't know how to regain control of a situation.
Yeah. Well, especially after you're bit.
Exactly. When you're bit, right? Exactly.
Yeah, and not only that I'll say you're bit, but it seems like there was a bit of unfairness to it. It's like you missed out on this gig kind of because your boss wasn't empathetic or compassionate enough just to let you go.
I know. I don't know if it's trying to get me to prove I was committed to the job or whatever. Many employers do that.
Yeah.
But those little things, it's like, how do you deal with those things? And in the best, most honorable way, so you can still get what you want and feel good about it. I didn't feel good about lying.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, you want what you want. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I was happy to go to my conference.
So how do we get what we want?
That's a very ample, very wide, open question. But it starts
some of the time.
But it starts with really letting people know what we want. And not just specifically in the moment I want to go to a conference, but letting my boss know that I value conference, period. I value education. I value these experiences. And I want him to help me get more of that experience and tie it back to my job.
Oh,
not just say, fair. Just one conference. I want to escape from here because I hate you guys and I want to go do my thing. Like rebel.
Yeah.
That's not the intention. It's intention to include people in your goals and your projects. Not just in the exact moment that they happen. You got to prepare them. You got to have intention. You got to bring them along the road, the journey with you so they can understand where you're coming from. Not just pop the question and say, I need to go tomorrow.
Right. So it's kind of strategic.
Yes.
It's helping them understand some of the reasons why you're doing it. Because, even from a conference standpoint, there's a business benefit, and that, typically conferences are business related. So even if you're just doing it, I'll say just for your own, pleasure. I don't know. do people just go to conferences for their own pleasure?
I did.
Right. But you're still picking up and exhibiting business-like behavior that's going to contribute back to the job that you're doing, for someone. So a little bit of communication can go a long way, even, and especially strategically letting them get that buy-in for your activities. Awesome.
And even if the boss knows that this is something that you value, because everybody and every employee has a different, like there's the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
Well, think of the appreciation languages in the work setting.
Yeah.
Which is, for me, at that point in my life, it was courses, it was conferences, it was meeting people, getting out there and growth oriented.
Yeah.
For some people, they don't care about that. They just want to say, you would hold their hand, say, you did a great job, and just demonstrate appreciation and say, bring cakes and stuff. For others, it's like, give me money, give me the money. So it varies, and it's important for us to be able to communicate proactively what we value to our boss so that they can come up with something and say, hey, Ivna, I know you really love the conferences. I know that you really wanted to go to this conference. How about this? If you work on this project and deliver this on time, I'll give you 3 opportunities and we'll pay for 3 conferences for you this year. Like, it gives you, the boss, the opportunity to be part of what you like and gives them the ability to enjoy that gift that they're giving to you. But if you just make it this contentious thing every single time, no one's going to have joy out of that. It's going to be like hurt, not joy.
That's another light bulb moment for me too, is just, yes, because I think, in the business world, things, it's strategic and it's almost like a game and a bit of negotiation. And some people definitely, once you're talking about bosses, bosses and leadership is definitely a place where negotiation happens probably all the time.
All the time.
Right. So you're just giving them an or an opportunity to exercise, their leadership or management skills. That's awesome. Cool.
And as a leader, I need to talk a lot about leadership. As a leader, you also want to incentivize your team members to actually share these things, to speak up assertively with you, because then you'll know how to motivate them. You'll know what they value, and you won't be wasting your time on things that they don't need and not going to add value to them and not going to add value to the organization. So it just gives you that roadmap that is individual to each person if they feel empowered to speak up.
I love that. So any helpful tips too, then, from a leadership standpoint? There's these different types of communicators. Is there a rule of thumb if you're in leadership and you have many different people with different personalities and different communication styles, to pick up on those and to adjust from a leadership perspective?
Yeah. So for someone who, let's say you have someone who's assertive, that's great, right? Communication is going to flow. If you have someone who is on the passive side, who's on the people pleaser side, who's on the overly agreeable side, who's on the quiet side and not sharing what they're really thinking, you got to really encourage them on one-on-ones, not in front of everybody initially, but one-on-ones, and really demonstrate that you really want to know what it is that they value. Give them options, give them examples. You need to, how they all say, it's just bring that sense of comfort and safeness that they can speak, and let them know that you value them expressing themselves and that you are not going to use that against them. It's like basic stuff, but it really helps people who are passive to overcome that challenge. But hey, why not actually teach them the communication styles and how to be assertive? Because then you don't have to be teaching them everything. Just give them an opportunity to learn. Give them a book, give them a course, give them an opportunity to learn assertiveness and role model the way. Show them what assertiveness looks like and explain to them that you're being assertive and that that's going to help them as well if they do the same.
Yes, I love that. I think a lot of times, a lot of people in that negotiation space and the leadership space, they do have this hard time because there's a lot of people pleasing. And a lot of leaders are successfully moving up into leadership because they're getting things done and they are pleasing. So really, they're highly successful. But they kind of get out of balance sometimes where it either feels like it's a one-way street and they're always giving, to get that balance then to even for them, especially if they're managing people, they're kind of in that middle space where they want to make their team successful and happy, and they also want to report up and make leadership happy. So it could be a tricky space to be in that balance.
Yeah, it's tricky, and just wanting to serve your boss or the organization, make your life easier, is not people pleasing on its own. It is more when you act against your own principles, your own values, your own priorities, and you don't talk about it. You don't negotiate. You don't open dialogue, and you just accept things as are when they bother you, when they make you uncomfortable, and you don't do anything about it, and you just follow the status quo. That's people please. That's where the danger lies.
Ooh, that is a great nugget. That's a great nugget. I talk in my podcast, The Everyday Heroine, about, resisting the status quo and fighting the status quo. But that was great to understand that place where, definitely don't compromise your own principles. I know with a lot of, my clients and my audience is that sometimes, especially working for a company, it's kind of like, I want to draw a Venn diagram.
Ooh, okay. I love it.
Right. So you have this Venn diagram of, the company has a mission, right? So that they're in one little bubble. And then you have your own, I like to call them unstoppable goals. And sometimes there's a little bit of shared space in between the business goal and a personal goal, right? Where you're trying to fulfill the mission of the company. So maybe the principles even align, but when people aren't as clear on their personal goals,
yes,
it's easy to get really like all in on the company side. And I think sometimes that can lead to some burnout or maybe even some people pleasing.
Yeah, it can. And when you feel like those negative feelings coming and taking over, when you wake up and you're uncomfortable and you something's off and you just feel frustrated and resentful of your boss and your company, conversations need to be had. Like, it's time to to understand, clarify what it is that you need, and then try to find that alignment with the organization, with your boss, with the company, in order to serve you and serve them. And if that doesn't work out, then at least it's clear to both parties and you can move on at your own rhythm.
So how did you get to be so good with assertiveness?
Okay, so great question. I first had what really started, the first time I actually got in contact with this concept and I really started learning how to do this, was the first time I actually had to lead a team. It's a brand new job. Day one, got a team. The team was growing. My job was very much interaction with many people, suppliers, clients, distributors, people in the company, different leaders in the company. And every day was a nightmare. Every day was a nightmare. My team from day one hated me. Distrusted me.
Really?
As nice as I was, the nicest girl you could ever imagine. I had one-on-ones with them. I listened. I told them everything was going to be okay. I was going to pay attention to their needs. They're like, you're a liar. You're a liar. Nothing's going to change. Everything's been like this forever. I'm not going to do what you're telling me to do. Interventions with me, telling me that everything was wrong, that they weren't happy. Anyways, it was a nightmare.
Whoa, that is a catastrophe.
Yeah, like when you imagine when you get to work one day and your entire team came early, got immediately confiscated you into a room and said, "This is an intervention.
Oh my
We're
gosh.
not happy with you. Things have to change. This is not working for us."
Talk
And
about a finger pointing.
finger pointing my whole team, and I'm just trying to be the nicest, most caring person that I can be all along. But that niceness came across as lack of leadership.
Right.
And they
Yes.
felt insecure, like I wasn't doing anything. So there's a huge disconnect between who I was trying to be and the person that they were seeing and the person that they needed. They needed a strong leader. They
Yeah.
needed an assertive leader. They needed a confident leader.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that person.
Okay.
And so go ahead.
What happened after that? That's a tough conversation.
Oh my gosh,
I mean,
I had
what
so
happened?
many.
I mean, yeah. So how did you even get yourself out of the room and then on to whatever way you took the direction in the team?
So, I mean, it was 1 year with this group, and that was only one of the issues. I mean, I had 2 or 3 employees refuse to do the work that I told them to do. Literally say, "I refuse to do this. I refuse to do this work." I had
Wow, like that's insubordination. Like
yes, I had lots
oh
of
my
insubordination
gosh.
issues. And in front, because it was all open desk, the
Oh.
lady was yelling her guts out, and everybody could hear the insubordination. Everybody was looking at how I was going to respond.
Oh my gosh, Ivna.
I know, it was so exciting. It was like the most overwhelming year of my life, but it was also the most growth that I've ever had in a year. Because from day one, my boss, and then I would tell my boss, like, "Hey, my team is not happy with me. They made the intervention today," or he's like, "I know, they came tell me beforehand. How did you handle it?" Or
Oh
when
my
when I got to my boss, I said, "Boss, this guy in my team says he's not going to do the work. He's refusing." My boss says, "Okay, well, what are you going to do?" I'm like, "I have no idea."
That's why I'm talking to you.
That's why I'm talking to you. And he'd coach me exactly what to say. And I wouldn't say it. Because I was too scared. It was too hard. It was too confrontational.
So he would tell you exactly what to say, and you were still, okay.
And then he said, then he'd call me 10 minutes later. "Ivna, did you have the conversation? Did you say what I told you to say?" I said, "No." He's like, "Go say it right now." And then I wouldn't. And then he called me half an hour later. "Ivna, did you have the conversation?" "No, not yet. I'm too busy." "There's no busy. This is your top priority. You have that conversation right now." And he'd do that with me every single time until I had every single conversation that I was running away from, firing a poor guy in my team.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Who wasn't doing any work. He made me let this dude go. I was scared. I had dreams this guy would haunt me. He would hire a team to come shoot me down on my way to work. Every day. Like I was so worried.
Like, oh, so this was like a nightmare that you were having when you slept.
Yeah.
Or was it a daydream? What was it? Oh my gosh. Like
I was just scared. I never fired someone before. And my boss coached me that like the right thing to do. There were 2 people that I had to fire, but I gave them a chance. But they just weren't performing. Others, I had to have the conversation. They did change their behavior, so things did work out. And with other people who were yelling at my team members, I had to deal with them because my team members would go to their office and they would come out crying.
Oh my
And so like
gosh.
so many issues in 1 year. I had the CFO of the company, super senior guy who never ever talked to me, call me up and say, "Hey, hire my nephew." And I had to say no. He's like, "No, you got to hire my nephew."
You said no to the CFO?
I did. So, I mean, it was a great year. I was like this the entire year.
Yeah.
But that was my year of assertiveness.
Yes, it was. So where did the not hiring the CFOs Where did that come in the year? Obviously, like, were you further along? Were you building up these skills? Because that takes a lot of guts. Did you
I
get
was
help
further
from your
along.
boss?
So my boss empowered me in the sense, like, at that point, he's like, Ivna, you do what you think is right. I'll let you make the decision.
Wow.
You do but you have the conversation with the CFO. I'm not going to interfere.
Yeah.
But you do what's right. Like, he was supporting me in whatever decision I wanted to make. And I had like 4 conversations with the CFO. He called me up many times to try to convince me to change my mind. I had to not say no once. I had to say no like 4 or 5 times.
Oh my gosh. That is a magical year.
That was the year. And the only reason I managed to learn all these skills was because, and I call it, this is my mentor, Mario. He taught me and like, I was so close to him. I wasn't scared. He was a great leader because he knew my weaknesses, but he pushed me outside of my comfort zone every single day. But he coached me, and I never felt scared of saying, hey, boss. Basically, it was the story of my life every single day. I would show up at his desk and say, I screwed this up. I messed this up. This person's really angry at me. This person's yelling. This person's doesn't want to buy anything from us anymore. I messed up so bad, I don't know what to do. That was my daily pitch to him, but he would always found a way to guide me. He said I was highly coachable and guidable. So
awesome.
We built a really good relationship as well.
Well, that's interesting because somewhere in those early years of engineering, also definitely at the consulting, right? So, I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. And it did feel like every little thing that I had to do, I had to ask a question.
Yes, that's hard as well, right?
It's very hard, but it does over time. There was a couple things, right? So it does give you the practice that says you have to reach out, because I wasn't going to get the work done. Like, I was going to lose my job because it was either lose my job because I'm not getting the work done or go ask for help. Those were
exactly.
Right?
Both scary,
both
scary. Uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But one was more uncomfortable than the other.
And then you do get better at it. You know, there's a little bit of pride over time where you start to feel like, okay, now I should be a little bit more seasoned. And eventually, I guess I did get there, to be honest. But that initial introductory period of going through that, it felt painful because it was a daily putting yourself out there, you know, being vulnerable. We weren't talking about that way back then, but that's what it was. I had to be so vulnerable every day. So cool.
Did you feel like you had to people please that extra bit more in order to get people's support and help when you had questions?
Yeah, it was, for me, I at the time, early in my career, especially because I was largely always the only woman in the room, I adopted a survival technique.
Okay, I'm curious now.
Is what it was. And so it was a catch-22 where I had to pretend like I was not a woman.
How so?
So I couldn't play the female card and be like, oh, that guy's just treating me this way because I'm a girl. Right? So I couldn't do that. But what was happening was there were certain gender dynamics. I know it better now, but at the time I was like, I didn't have anybody to talk to, anybody to really console with. So I had to take on a lot of those challenges just by myself. So I would uncover certain things where it was like, that is definitely a gender bias. And that is definitely, like we talk about nowadays, is like these microaggressions. No, everything was macroaggressions back then.
Only macro.
Like massively offensive. But I like couldn't. I was like, even if this is massively offensive, I can't be confrontational back. I have to I have to do double duty, prove my worth, and all of those things. Yeah, it was exhausting. Looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, what I did to just survive. I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Absolutely glad I did. But yeah.
What was like one of those examples of macroaggressions?
Oh, I'm not going to be able to remember something specific at this time, I don't think. I do remember, and it was at that job that I remembered finding out that I was being paid less than my male counterpart. And I had
significantly less?
It was like 10%.
Okay.
Which, is significant enough. And I had more experience.
Yeah.
So that was frustrating. The crazy thing was that he was a good friend, and we worked well together. So there was a part of us where, even though we knew this, together.
Oh, you knew that. Both of you knew it.
We kind of outed it out with each other. And then it became, the boss became the bad guy.
Oh, so both of you aligned together against.
It was almost like, hey, it's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's like, oh, how did this happen? It was like, oh, the guy in the corner is the bad guy. So yeah.
So I had a similar experience, again, in the same job that I was talking about, but I took a different spin on it. Like my learning was different, which was, I can't remember exactly. I saw in the paper or something, this guy who joined after I did, who has way less experience and way less relevant. All my experiences were like 10 times better than his. Like my schools, my previous jobs, everything. And I thought my work was way superior. I thought his work was so childish. And so I saw that he was earning like 30% more than I was.
Ooh.
I was so angry.
Ooh.
I was furious. I'm like, I thought my boss liked me. He always says good things about me. Why is he paying this guy 30%? He does not deserve 30%. And the guy was getting it. His team was growing very quickly. But when I started to kind of observe me versus him, what I noticed myself, I didn't think it was a gender thing. I thought it was a behavioral problem. He was always self-promoting, like 24/7. I never self-promoted.
Yes.
I was just in my desk doing my hard work, speaking very, very softly and trying to deal with one problem after the other, working exceptionally long hours every single day, getting home at 10 p.m., the last one to close the office, and sustained, right? For a year or more. And the guy was doing his 8 hours, leaving, but self-promoting like there was no tomorrow. And I'm like, that's the difference.
Oh, right. It's interesting, isn't it? Isn't it? Because they do a lot of times. I'll share this briefly, and then we'll have to bring it to a close. I could talk to you forever. I do remember this one time that a guy in front of our boss, we were doing a planning meeting before we were going out into the field to do a large commissioning system on a brand new system. So, and there's all kinds of challenges with the brand new system. Everybody's under stress and everything else. And this guy was older. So he basically called me out in this meeting in front of our boss. And he said something to this nature. He said, you are never going to be able to commission this system, basically. Just point blank.
Terrible.
But the interesting part was it wasn't founded in fact. It was just an opinion.
Yes.
And I was older, I was kind of more seasoned. I was probably 20 years into my career. And I quickly responded to him that, because the way I took that was he was trying to kick me off the team. He didn't want me to come along.
Oh.
And I basically called it out and I said, you can't deny me the opportunity and then criticize me for not being able to do it.
Wow, look at you. Wow. And you came up with the response just like that in the moment? That's so difficult.
And because I'm not good that way.
Wow.
But at that point in my career, I was like, so many times you're not given the opportunity. And I saw him for what he was trying to do. He was trying to basically prevent me from having an opportunity for success. Yeah. I wouldn't have been able to do that early in my career, but later in my career.
That's significant. That takes a lot of guts to say that, to respond that way. And quickly and in the moment.
And the interesting thing was, in the moment, I didn't realize it until way later. The boss loved it. And the reason why the boss loved it was because the boss didn't have the same skill set that him and this other guy did. And he was relying on me to challenge this guy.
No way. So that worked.
And I didn't know it. I didn't know it. So
wow.
Once I kind of figured that, I was like, oh, it all makes sense. Yeah.
That is a great story.
You and I could talk forever. Help us understand how people can get in touch with you and a little bit more about assertiveway.com.
Well, thanks for asking. Your audience can start by actually visiting assertiveway.com. There are different free resources. If you go to free, there's a free training on assertiveness that you can take 35 minutes and understand like a lot. Tens of thousands of people have gone through this training. You can also, there's a podcast episodes as well. There are articles. Help yourself on the website, basically.
Cool. Very cool. Any other closing comments? I usually close with a quote.
Okay. My quote or your quote?
I'll take your quote if you have a quote.
I don't have a quote. Okay. But I do like the quote. There's a quote that I think about a lot. And it applies to assertiveness, but to many other things.
Okay.
Which is bias towards imperfect action.
Ooh.
It's not even a quote. It's like a tagline.
I love that, though, because there's beauty in the imperfection.
And we must act. And the best way to overcome fear is by action. The best way to move forward is action. And the best way to improve your assertiveness or any other skill is to take action and course correct along the way.
Ooh, those are awesome parting words. Ivna, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to have you on and to have a conversation again with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for being a part of the conversation for inspiring women's leadership. Coffee Time with Kauffman is the comfortable place to discuss women's leadership because I am on a mission to help the world discover the truth about what women are capable of. When you are ready for your leadership mastery makeover, go to mariakaufman.com and click on Consult a Coach, where you can schedule time with me for an empowerment session. Have a great week. Enjoy your adventures and journey responsibly.